Hi, I'm Michelle Shepard, host of Uncover Sharmini from CBC Podcasts. In 1999, 15-year-old Sharmini Anandavale disappeared on her way to a job that police believed didn't exist. 4 months later, her remains were found in a wooded ravine. I revisit the case that has stayed with me for over 20 years, ever since I first covered it as a cub crime reporter for the Toronto Star. You can find Uncover Sharmini on CBC Listen or on your favorite podcast app.
This is a CBC podcast.
This is Unreserved on CBC Radio 1. I'm Phelan Johnson. I'm talking to you from the Toronto International Film Festival. Well, sort of. I'm not exactly standing on the red carpet. I'm in my kitchen making popcorn. For me and so many festival goers, this is what TIFF looks like this year. TIFF is one of the biggest film festivals in the world. On a typical year, it attracts hundreds of thousands of people and celebrities and creators for galas and screenings and parties. But with travel restrictions and the need to social distance, this year looks a lot different. But, as they say in the biz, the show must go on.
I wanted to be a filmmaker since I was 12 years old, so it's really 30 years in the making.
I feel like there's definitely going to be a shift in this world after this comes out because it's native storytelling, coming to life.
We're not emerging artists in our community. We've been doing this for years, and it's just now the world seems to be ready to take note.
There are so many Indigenous filmmakers for us to toast this year. So grab your popcorn and join me on the virtual red carpet. Now, you don't want it to burn, so you got to keep moving it. This has now become a cooking show. Oh, here we go.
My name is Cameron Bailey. I'm the artistic director and co-head of TIFF. We, of course, can't gather in the thousands to watch movies together as we usually do, not in person anyhow. So we're doing some physically distant screenings here in our own building in Toronto, TIFF Bell Lightbox, with a maximum of 50 people wearing masks and distance. We're using drive-ins for the very first time in our 45-year history. And we've got a big online presence this year as well, where we're sharing movies with people all over Canada via a digital cinema platform. We knew after we were a couple of months into the shutdown that we still wanted to go ahead with the festival. There were all kinds of amazing films that we were seeing that were ready to be launched that we wanted to bring to audiences, but we knew we couldn't do it in the usual way. And so we actually had to pivot at that point and figure out how to get an online platform working. And the way it works is you can buy tickets via our website, and you can actually watch those films if you're in Canada, wherever you are in the country, on a number of different devices. It can be either an app on your TV or on your laptop or wherever you like. You can watch those at home. There is a limited time window to watch them, but they're available to all Canadians. We love bringing the whole film world to Toronto every year. We've been doing that for decades, but this is exciting because it allows us to reach further across the country. We're hoping to get people talking, especially about the Canadian films. About a third of the films in our lineup this year are by Canadian filmmakers, and those storytellers and those stories are especially important to us. We are really reflecting a change that's happening in Canadian film and Canadian culture generally. For a long time, Indigenous filmmakers didn't have the opportunities that non-Indigenous Canadian filmmakers did. There were barriers in place. There was all kinds of misunderstanding of Indigenous stories and also just what we're now calling narrative sovereignty, the idea that Indigenous creators should tell Indigenous stories, and there's all kinds of protocols around that. Now, we're seeing this surge of films, and we're lucky enough to be able to present a number of them. We have the new film by Tracy Deer called Beans. She grew up on the Ganawage Reserve and was there during the Oka crisis, and tells the story of a young girl, much like herself as a girl, who's behind the lines on reserve as this really intense conflict is happening with the white Quebec citizens and the police there.
My name is Tika Handekwa. Or you can call me Beans. Everybody does.
We've also got a feature film called Inconvenient Indian, which is an adaptation of the Thomas King book that was so popular and widely read a few years back. Also, a new series called Trickster, and that is a really compelling story which takes place on a reserve and has these wonderful kind of magical elements as well as just giving you an immersive sense of what reserve life is like.
Jared, your life belongs to no one but you.
Tell me about the night I was born.
Get me my baby!
I saw something weird last night. You're not real, I'm tripping.
You're not real. I'm tripping.
Crazy's hereditary, right?
You!
Mom!
What are you doing?
How do you know Wade again?
He's my dad's friend.
Is that what he told you, Jared?
What are you?
I was gonna tell you when the time was right. A trickster.
A trickster?
So it's a really rich lineup this year. There's a lot to see. You know, these are stories that are the most Canadian stories you can find. And I think it's really important that they be seen by Canadians, that we kind of embrace those stories, learn, because there's so much that if you grew up in Canada not as a part of an Indigenous community, you just don't know, right? And just the perspectives of Indigenous Canadians, the histories, the mythologies, all of those things are in many cases new to people who just weren't taught them in school or didn't learn about them any other way. And they tell us a lot about what this country is, about what we all need to do in terms of reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Canadians, and just how to understand who we are as a nation better and how to live together.
That was Cameron Bailey, artistic director and co-head of the Toronto International Film Festival. He was talking to us about the selection of Indigenous films screening this year. The COVID-19 pandemic has presented many challenges for the film festival, but it's also opened it up to many Canadians who are able to view the films for the first time ever from the comfort of their own homes. This is Unreserved on CBC Radio 1, Sirius XM 169 and Native Voice 1. I'm Phelan Johnson. Still ahead.
Even at its smallest stone, that brick came from the universe. Just like you.
That's a clip from Reckless. In just a few minutes, Tank Standing Buffalo explains the deeply personal story behind that animated short film. But first,
the truth about stories is that's all we are. Once a story is told, it cannot be called back. Once told, it's loose in the world. So you have to be careful with the stories you tell, and you have to watch out for the stories you are told.
That's the voice of Thomas King from the new feature film The Inconvenient Indian, which is based on his best-selling book. It's premiering at the Toronto International Film Festival this year. The Inconvenient Indian is written and directed by Algonquin and Métis filmmaker Michelle Latimer. Michelle has not one but two major projects premiering at TIFF. She also directed Trickster, based on Eden Robinson's acclaimed novel, Son of a Trickster. Michelle joins me now from her home in Toronto. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Phelan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. We're happy to have you here. So for people who aren't familiar with Thomas King's book, The Inconvenient Indian, how do you describe it?
It's a difficult book to describe because Thomas covers so much ground, but really it's the history of colonization in North America, but told through his lens. So he uses humor. You know, it's funny, he says to me that he always disarms people with his humor, and then he pulls out the knife. And I really feel that that expresses the book in the best way, because there can be a moment where you're just running along, listening to his story, and he's a fantastic storyteller. And then you're laughing, and next thing you know, it's a gut punch. And I feel that that captures the spirit of Indigenous people. We go through a lot of things, and it can be really tough, but we always have the ability to laugh at it. And we have such a good sense of humor despite some of the atrocities we end up living through in our lives. And I feel like Thomas really encapsulates that in this book.
And do you remember when you first picked up the book and read it, and, you know, what impact it had on you?
I do. I read it around the time it first came out. And it was not long after that I ended up going to Standing Rock to document the occupation against the Dakota Access Pipeline there. And I'd never thought about making the book into a film, but when I was in Standing Rock, I saw a lot of those ideas that are in Thomas's book enacted on the ground in the front lines. And when I came back from Standing Rock, I guess that was when I really started to think about making it into a film.
And the book, The Inconvenient Indian, it's pretty genre-defying. It's, unconventional in so many ways. It blends history and humor and personal narrative from Thomas King's perspective. How did you approach adapting all of those things from the book to the big screen?
Yeah, it was actually very intimidating in the beginning. When Jesse Wente and Stuart Henderson, the producers of the film, when they approached me to adapt the book, my initial reaction was, I'm not a historian, I'm not an academic, I can't do this. And then the publisher sent me an illustrated version of the book. And those illustrations spanned everything from Thomas King's own photographs in his travels to old posters from the original land settlement posters when Canada was trying to entice settlers to come here and occupy lands. And I think that got me really thinking about the history that media has played in the misrepresentation of Indigenous peoples in this country.
One of my favorite moments in the film is a hunting scene. And early in the film, you bring in a clip from the 1922 movie Nanook of the North, and that movie represents the Inuit as primitive. But you show us a contemporary hunting scene. So you kind of flip the script in a way. And can you tell us, why was that important to show contemporary hunting?
Nanook of the North is an interesting film because when that was being recorded, it was considered one of the first feature documentaries, and it was recorded from Robert Flaherty, who was asking Inuk people to hunt with spears, and when at the time they were actually hunting with rifles. And so he was actually setting them back in time. And this is where I think this perpetuates the stereotype of that all Native people are stuck in the past, where this 19th century representation of a dead Indian and I use those words meaning the Thomas King words from his book, Dead Indian, where we're stuck with leathers and feathers and we're a stereotypical romanticized version of ourselves. But we exist in the now, and many of our cultural practices and traditions are existing with us right now.
We've been talking about your recent work, but I'd like to go back in time a bit and talk about some of your first work. At the age of 14, your first job was working at a historical park representing Indigenous culture for tourists. Can you describe what that experience was like and how it influenced the making of the film The Inconvenient Indian?
Well, I wasn't thinking about that experience as related. And, it's so funny. Everything's related, but it takes time for us to make those connections in our lives. And at the time, at 14, I lived up the hill from Old Fort William, the historical fort, and it was an easy summer job. I could walk to work, and I thought it was great. But I remember, it's so funny, we would have tourists from all over the world, but we would often have German tourists, and we weren't allowed to break character. And so they would say to us, if they ask you, you can't break character. So I would have to tell my character story, and I'd say, well, I don't go to school. And they'd be like, you don't go to school? And I'd be like, no, ma'am. People like me are not allowed to read and write, learn how to read and write. That's only, and they would be like, you have to get out of here. You don't understand. There's a life here beyond this. And I remember in that time thinking, this is really weird. And meanwhile, we have these stone ovens. We're supposed to be baking bread, but really we're making nachos, and I'm listening to Nirvana on my lunch break, So it was like reflecting on that experience is so interesting because it's exactly these ideas that are encapsulated in Thomas King's book of that we are only seen when we exist in the past. And the inconvenience, as Thomas puts it, is when Native people exist right now, standing up for our rights and demanding that our sovereignty be respected.
I think that's a nice thing about this film is that it does challenge these notions of what we look like and when we are visible, to, know that our heritage isn't tied to leathers and feathers, as you say. And yeah, I think your film is challenging in many ways. I feel like it's almost a call to action to audiences. What do you hope that people take away from the film?
Well, twofold. For Indigenous people, I hope that they see it as a love letter to our community. I hope they see it as a celebration of the amazingness that we have in our communities. Like, it's just we see enough dark stuff on the news. I really want to celebrate what's magnificent about our communities and our artists. For non-Indigenous audience, I really want to provoke them to actually activate themselves and do things to be accountable to the history in the way they move forward in their own lives. And when Thomas says very early on in the film, you have to be careful of the stories you tell, and you have to be careful of the stories you're told, because once the story's unleashed, it can never be called back. And so to think about in this time of call-out culture and social media, and to think about the power of our words and the power of the stories we perpetuate, and how do our conscious and unconscious biases play into that narrative, and to really think about making space for other voices and new stories.
That's lovely. Michelle, you have not one but two major projects premiering at TIFF this year, one of the biggest film festivals in the world. And we've been talking to you about your feature film, The Inconvenient Indian. You also directed Trickster, an adaptation of Eden Robinson's novel, Son of a Trickster. So what's it like for you to see, this increase of Indigenous representation at major festivals?
It's interesting because I came up in a time during the Imaginative Media Arts Festival where there were so many of us creating work, but we were mostly creating short films at the time. And now all those short filmmakers are now making features. I mean, Tracy Deer has her debut feature at TIFF as well. And I think it's been a long time coming. But we've been working at this for a really long time. I know the world might see us as emerging artists, but we're not emerging artists in our community. We've been doing this for years, and it's just now the world seems to be ready to take note. And I'm excited by that. I think it's really important that Indigenous people take up spaces in art galleries, at film festivals. That's as important as taking up space on the front lines of an occupation.
Michelle, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm so honored. I love this show.
Michelle Latimer is the writer and director of The Inconvenient Indian and the director of Trickster. If you want to find out more about Michelle's work, visit our website, cbc.ca/unreserved. This is Unreserved on CBC Radio 1, Sirius XM 169 and Native Voice 1. I'm Phelan Johnson. And today we're talking about what has become a very unusual year for the Toronto International Film Festival. Because while all of society is in the middle of a global pandemic, we are also going through big social changes. After the shooting of George Floyd in Minneapolis, which led to worldwide protests and discussions on race, and representation has been at the forefront of many of our minds. TIFF artistic director Cameron Bailey says these discussions are particularly important when talking about cinema in Canada and beyond.
I think anyone who hasn't seen themselves up on screen before, whether that's the big screen or the small screen, you kind of almost breathe in a new way. You breathe this kind of deep sigh of recognition when you finally do see a story that reflects something of what you've been through yourself, and you don't realize how much you've missed it until you see it. And if you've gone through life not having that experience, where the movies and the TV shows you watch actually do just normally reflect who you are and your family life and your background and that kind of thing, you take it for granted, imagine that being taken away. And not having the opportunity to see yourself reflected. And then you might get a sense of what it's like for those of us, and I'm a Black Canadian, and I'm only now, I think, beginning to see myself up on the big screen in terms of those stories. When you recognize what it's like to not have that, then you understand just the reward that comes with it, the sense of just recognition, of affirmation, the fact that your life has some value, because the things that we tell stories about are the things that we value. I think it's really important that all of us have that feeling of being valued.
That was TIFF artistic director Cameron Bailey. Up next, from Canada Reads to your TV screen, Trickster is a new CBC TV show based on the series by author Eden Robinson.
You must be Maggie's boy. Oh, hey, Jared. This is my buddy, Wade. Wade, my boy, Jared.
I see the resemblance.
You know my mom?
Yeah, back in the day.
3 of us were inseparable.
Never heard of you before.
Oh, you've been gone, what now, 20 years?
Almost. Funny, you don't look anything like him. In fact, you got my eyes.
What?
I said you got my eyes. Ask your mom.
Hi, my name is Joelette, and I play Jared in Trickster.
Hi, my name is Kalani Kwepo. I play Wade in Trickster.
Trickster is about a regular teenager named Jared, who is, he's dealing with school problems, he's dealing with girl problems, all that stuff, but at the same time he has this family who is, substance users and are addicts, so he's kind of like the provider for the family, he has a job, and at the same time he's a drug dealer, he makes Molly and he deals it as a job, he's a really smart kid, and his life gets like blown upside down when this stranger comes into play and tells him some stuff that makes Jared question his reality, and he's kind of on this path to self-discovery.
Wade is actually from the Kitimat community originally. He's the buddy of Jared's father, or at least the man he believes is his father. So when Wade comes into town, he delivers this news to Jared in sort of mysterious and at the same time in a very direct way. And he suggests very strongly that he indeed is Jared's father. So that turns the world upside down.
Well, me and Jared, I was 17 when I got casted, and he is a 17-year-old kid. I just graduated, and he's still in high school. But so I could kind of relate to a lot of the things that he was going through. Like for instance, I don't know, girls or peer pressure, parties, stuff like that, or academics. I don't think me and him are the best in academics, but. Yeah, I don't know. It was really cool reading the book and kind of, trying to like form this character that you're gonna play onto a screen and portray this character in a novel. And it was just so cool, reading a novel and doing that.
So I showed up at the airport in Toronto and, get my bags, get outside, and there'll be a driver to meet me. So I get there, and it's a van, and we're going to drive to Ontario. So I go and I go around side, slide that side entrance door open, and I looked over, and there was Joel and his mom, Lori, and it was electric. I remember just staring at Joel and thinking, oh my gosh, he looks like my family. He could be my kid. And there's this unexplainable familiarity that you have, and you lean into that. And this idea of art imitating life imitating art. We really bonded, and Joel leaned on me simply because I have more experience in the industry.
It was like it was just meant to be, and we stopped like halfway through, and we did stop at Timmy's, and I was just like drinking my blue raspberry slushy, looking up at him, and just living like, yeah, this guy's cool as hell. He's playing my dad, and kind of both like realized that we're gonna be making history.
The thing about Trickster is that there is something for everyone. Like we look at Joel and we're like, okay, teen heartthrob, like the girls are going to go crazy for him. And, you know, you've got all these edgy circumstances that are happening, right? Because it's like the 17-year-old kid who's trying to take care of his parents, and he's working a job at the drive-thru, trying to juggle his studies in high school.
Jared is the parent to his parents, and you don't really see that a lot. And you don't really see, you know, he doesn't do drugs like his parents, but he deals them, you know, and that's super. It's a compelling story, but at the same time, you know, he's dealing with all this school problems. And Wade comes and throws his life upside down with, you know, and then he's thrown into this magical, you know, thrilling world that catches him really off guard. And I feel like it's going to bring a lot of people of color, like, you know, us Native people, confidence, and realize that they can do this too. You know, they can see that they can be an actor too if they want to. I feel like it's just going to boost their confidence more, and I feel like there's definitely going to be a shift in this world after this comes out, because it's Native storytelling, you know, coming to life. It's the trickster coming to life. It's you're going to see this on a screen and realize that they can do it too.
That was Joel Ouellette and Kalani Kwepo talking about their experience shooting Trickster, which premiered at TIFF and will be available on CBC TV and CBC Gem this fall. This is Unreserved on CBC Radio 1, Sirius XM 169 and Native Voice 1. I'm Phelan Johnson. Still ahead.
I'm not going.
Yes, you are. And only bring what's most important.
Can we go to Disneyland? But April's not going.
It doesn't matter, since she's not part of this family, and you are.
Okay, which one?
The little one.
So when we hit the road.
Well, you'll be going as soon as you're packed.
You're not coming?
No, honey. Okay. Only the elders, women, and children are going. It's important that we get you someplace safe.
Dad, can I please just stay here with you?
No! You're coming, and that's final. Now pack.
That's a clip from the new feature film Beans, which recently premiered at TIFF. Beans is a coming-of-age story about a Mohawk girl growing up during the armed standoff known as the 1990 Oka Crisis. More on that in just a few minutes. Tank Standing Buffalo thought when he finished his short film, he'd post it on Instagram and get a couple of likes. Instead, Reckless is showing at TIFF this year. The animated film is based on Tank's life experience as a youth in the criminal justice system, and it explores how art saved his life. Tank is mixed race, Anishinaabe, and he joins me now to talk about his film. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
Your animated film is based on your own true story. Can you tell us what the animation shows us?
Yeah, it starts with my friends collecting some money, and it doesn't go well. So we have to get out, and we get into a high-speed chase. So then we get caught, and then I go to jail. Well, we all go to jail, but from there, it just focuses on my experience. Yeah, so I get thrown into segregation, and it was only supposed to be, I forget what the infraction was, but it was only supposed to be for a week. But even just that short week, at the end of it, I was kind of losing it. That week of me being in segregation turned into 6 months. I just kept acting out. There's a point, it's not shown in the cartoon, but they take away pencils, my paper. And for someone who compulsively draws, that was the worst thing. So for some reason, I started to scratch myself, like you see like some animals at the zoo where they just start to gnaw on their own foot. I started to do the same thing, and then realized that my blood was like ink, and I could draw on the walls, and I could still draw. But this infuriated the guards even further. And yeah, I got beat down for that. And then I was in there for so long, we had an elder that would come by and check up on his kids, make sure that we were doing okay. And he comes in and gives me some counsel. That's the end.
I can't imagine what that must have been like for you. And so, Why did you want to take this experience and portray it on the screen?
Well, I didn't want to at all. I was encouraged by my producer, Christine Cook. She knew a bit about my history, and she wanted me to tell a bit of that, and I was really hesitant. I just always stuck to lowbrow type art, like just cool stuff, like wrestling and hot rods. And I was never really interested, like even as like a movie genre, like dramas don't interest me at all. Like I have to live my real life. I don't want to follow someone else's. But it took her a bit, and I finally agreed. But the story was pretty much the same, but I would set it in like cowboy time or like way in the future. And she was pretty insistent on it being real. So I trusted her. And with the encouragement of my friend who's in the cartoon, he really pushed for it too, that I do this. And so far, so good. It worked out.
It's nice to have that push sometimes, yeah. One of the scenes that stuck out for me was when you're driving the getaway car while your friends, mid-chase, are admiring your drawings. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that was always the way. Like, I've been drawing since I could hold a pencil. And pretty much my whole life, almost everyone in my life had encouraged me to pursue that. But there was really no avenue to pursue. My friends would always tell me that I shouldn't be going out with them, that I shouldn't be following their path. But what else was I to do? Have no friends? I don't know. So, and they really liked seeing their cartoon selves and me being able to depict us in like humorous ways. They got a lot of joy out of it. There was one time I had drawn this big poster of all of us, and the cops came and raided our place, and they took the poster, and then they blew it up like pretty big, like the size of this wall, and they had like this town hall meeting about how crazy the town is getting, and look at what these kids are doing. And that was my first bit of notoriety with my art, and I saw that it got this attention, even though it was negative attention. Like to me, like that was awesome. Like they hated what I was doing, which made me want to do it even more. But my friends loved what I was doing, which made me want to do it more too.
That is quite the leap. Having your work confiscated by the police to now being at TIFF. How do you feel about that?
Well, that's really all my producer's doing. I had no idea that she was even applying for any of that. But I had no idea that this would have the legs that it did. Yeah, when she told me, it didn't really register me what TIFF really was. Like I heard of it, but I didn't know how big of an honor it was to be accepted into it.
Well, I mean, especially in a year where the festival has been so heavily curated, they didn't select that many films. And so, has this sort of fueled your fire to keep going? Like I've heard you potentially might want to make this into a series.
I'm making this correlation between children's aid now and residential schools of the past, and not even that long ago, of the government coming and splitting up families in hopes that they can fit in better to what normal society is, or their sanctified version of a family. My brothers and sisters all went through foster care. I was too old, and I went to jail instead. But we were never together as a family after that.
I'm excited to see what you come up with next and next and next, because I'm sure there's lots of great things coming from you.
Thank you.
That's Tank Standing Buffalo. He made Reckless, an animated short that's premiering at TIFF. 30 years ago, Mohawk director Tracy Deer was a 12-year-old girl living in Kahnawake. She lived through the armed standoff that became known as the Oka Crisis. The historic confrontation between the Mohawk, the RCMP, the Canadian Army, and the Quebec Police lasted for 78 days. There were army tanks, barricades, and tear gas. The standoff started because the nearby town of Oka in Quebec decided that they wanted to expand their golf course from 9 holes to 18. The golf course expansion meant encroaching on Mohawk land, leveling an ancient forest, and disturbing a burial ground. Mohawk residents resisted. The movie Beans mirrors Tracy's experience of that time through the eyes of a 12-year-old girl. Beans is Tracy's feature film debut, and it recently premiered at TIFF. Tracy, Sago, and welcome to the show.
Sago, thank you for having me.
So first, a massive congratulations to you. I wanted to know, when did you want to make this film? When did you know this was a film that you wanted to make?
Oh, this goes all the way back 30 years. I wanted to be a filmmaker since I was 12 years old. And even back then, you know, my story sense was like the Oka crisis through a child's point of view is the dream project that one day I want to be able to make. So it's really 30 years in the making.
And so how much of you is in this film? Are there some scenes that are recreated directly from your memory and from your experience?
Yes, there are definitely some scenes that are pulled directly from my memory. And the emotional journey that this main character, Beans, goes on is also inspired by my own journey. But there are definitely a number of scenes specifically to the Oka crisis that I put my character in, but I was not there for those specific scenes.
And the Oka crisis is frequently framed from an outside looking in. You know, even the name Oka crisis is an outside framing. You know, I know many Indigenous people call it the resistance at Ganas or the barricade or 90 or even the war. There's so much news footage from that time that positions the viewer on the outside. But your film, Beans, it really brings us inside. You put us right in it. So why was it important for you to make your film this way?
Well, we've all seen that coverage. I mean, I lived through it. Of course, I was a child at the time and didn't pay a ton of attention. But really, the Oka crisis defined who I am and how I feel about myself on such a massive scale. So over the last 30 years, I mean, I've read every book, I've seen every movie, I've written papers, my own documentary films also have explored pieces of it. And so I've seen all of that footage and the coverage, and it's so strange to watch it because the way they talk about us and the images they show, it's so different from the reality I was living then and the reality of the community that I know and love. And I wanted to counter that message with the truth, honestly, the truth of what our community is and who our people are and what our experience was like that summer when we were attacked, essentially.
And how did you navigate making a movie about such a traumatic time? You know, being conscious of working with the young actors and shooting scenes where there's racism and so much violence and so much hate. And you also had to be conscious of not re-traumatizing people who, you know, were personally affected by the Oka crisis. How did you approach all of that?
So that was my biggest concern. And I really, really wanted to get this story out there, but not at any expense. So the biggest challenge was to figure out, how do we do this? And for all of us to be safe, of course, physically, but definitely emotionally. It was important to me that everybody came on board with informed consent. So often when you're booking an extra, you're just calling and telling them when to show up and what to bring. And an extra will get to set and really only find out as they're being brought to set, like what they'll be doing. Okay, you're in a grocery store and you're going to be walking down and picking out cereal. And they do what they're asked to do. But in this case, I did not want anyone showing up to set and be surprised or shocked or horrified about what they were going to need to do. So everybody who did come out did want to be a part of it. And many of them had experienced it themselves. They've lived it as well, just as I did. And they wanted to be there to be a part of sharing this story with the world.
So this is obviously a very personal film for you. Can you tell me what it was like to make a movie about such a traumatic time in your own life?
It was really difficult. The script writing phase took a good 8 years. There were times when I would go to sit down and write these very specific scenes from my memory, and I just had a physical reaction. You know, I would start crying, I would start shaking, I wanted to throw up, and I physically could not do it. I could not type words. So, and sometimes I tried to force myself through it, but then most of the time I just step up and go, okay, it's not today. And that went on for a while. For the longest time, the script just had these place marks of like, okay, this is where the rocks will be thrown. And it was just 2 blank pages for the longest time. And when I finally did have to write that scene, I did cry the entire way through it, remembering, you know, what my mother said and how she sounded, and my sister, and then of course the filming of it all. You know, filming that scene in particular is definitely the hardest day I've ever had.
When you say that scene, you're talking about a moment during the Oka crisis that's often referred to as Rocks at Whiskey Trench. This is when many Mohawk children and women and elders were pelted by angry Quebecers with stones on a highway underpass called Whiskey Trench. Let's hear a bit of that scene from the film.
Get on the floor now.
Why?
Get on the floor! I said unbuckle! Now! Stay
And I found that scene incredibly hard to watch, and incredibly difficult to, you know, be inside the car with that family and those girls. And you can really hear the emotion playing out in that scene. What was it like for you on set that day?
There were tears. There were moments I had to just step back, take a few deep breaths. And of course, everybody knew what this day meant to me, and everyone was concerned. But at the beginning of the day, I went to these close friends and colleagues and just said, I know you're all concerned, but what I really need is for nobody to ask me how I'm doing, because that question will just rip me open, and I don't know that I'll recover. So I know that you care. Please don't ask me that question. We can talk about it at the end of the day. And they, you know, we all hugged and they said, got it, Tracy, we're here for you. And I just put on my director's hat, and, you know, the defense mechanism I developed all those years ago to compartmentalize pain and whatnot. I mean, in this case, it came in handy. I was able to compartmentalize for most of the day and be there for my cast and be there for my crew and get what we needed to get to tell this story.
So last night I was talking to my sister. She's seen the movie as well. She's a couple of years older than me. During the Oka crisis, she was around 10 and I was around 8, so not too much younger than Beans and her little sister in the film. And I have to say, watching your work, I don't think I've ever seen myself reflected back so specifically. You know, hearing someone say Sago on screen, it just brought so much joy to me and made me smile and made me feel so seen. So, you know, what power do you think representation can have in film?
Okay, well, I'm going to need a moment because you're making me cry now. That just means so much to me, because it is really about us being seen and being heard and being understood, and that is really the goal I am setting out to do with the work that I do. So to hear you say that, I'm just so thrilled. It's the best feedback I could get. So thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. We're just going to be both here weeping for a while. Just a couple of tough Mohawk chicks weeping.
I do think representation is so, so important. And as you just said, growing up, I did not see us. And, you know, that has an effect. I felt invisible. I felt unimportant. You know, like our television screens and our movie screens, they're not just for entertainment. They're not just places to zone out. We learn about the world through what we see. And if we do not see ourselves, then the message is we are not a part of the world. And for little kids, that message is so destructive. So I want to be a part of changing that. And that is what I can do. That is my superpower. I am a storyteller, and this is the contribution I can make. I want our kids to see themselves. I want them to know that they are a part of this big world, and their dreams are important and their voices are important. this is one way that I can hopefully, help to make that happen.
Tracy Nyawagoa for being here today and speaking about your film Beans. It really is a feat, so congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Beans is Tracy Deer's debut feature film. It premiered at TIFF. Tracy was honored at TIFF this year with an Emerging Talent Award. And if you want to find out more about Tracy's work, visit our website, cbc.ca/unreserved. We're almost out of time for today, but I wanted to give the final word to TIFF Artistic Director Cameron Bailey. Because now that you know all of these films are accessible to watch at home, you might want to take the opportunity to get into that film festival spirit. And, of course, a big part of TIFF are the galas, the premieres, the red carpets, the gowns, the beaded earrings, the stars with all their stylish outfits. But with much of the festival taking place online, Cameron Bailey says you could still make a point to dress your best, even if you're just watching from the couch.
So many people just default to, sweatpants and PJs when they watch movies at home. But, it can be an occasion, especially if you're one of the first people in the world to see a film like Beans or Inconvenient Indian, because both of which were premiering. So, yeah, why not dress up a little bit? Why not, put on some makeup, put on your nice clothes, treat yourself like you're being taken out to a festival gala premiere and, make something nice to eat, open a bottle of whatever you like to drink, and make an occasion of it. And take photos and post them, I think, would be fun to do as well. Well, I'm actually out every day. We do have some screenings that we're doing in person, and I'm at the drive-ins as well. So I won't get the chance to do that until after the festival. But when I'm at home, actually, my wife makes fun of me because I sometimes look like I'm going out when I'm at home. I don't have those kind of, comfy casual clothes at all. So I like to just dress nice whenever I can.
Well, I think I'm going to take some of that advice. I'm going to do, maybe I'll do my hair and I'll put on a bit of lipstick, but the pajama pants, non-negotiable. They stay on. That's it for this week's episode of Unreserved. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at unreserved@cbc.ca or find us on Facebook or Twitter. Unreserved is produced by Zoe Tennant, Kyle Musica, Stephanie Kram, and Anna Lazowski. I'm Phelan Johnson. Thanks, and Nyawagoa for listening.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/podcasts.